Waterloo is one of the top 50 engineering universities in the world, which means it's super rigorous, but they have one of the lowest dropout rates. How do they do that?
Well, basically, they know how to pick the right students for their school and for their
Yeah,
program. Yeah,
and that's what makes it so competitive in that admissions process.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. We're talking about Waterloo, Canada's
Yes.
#1 school for computer science, engineering, and co-ops. It's produced more startup founders than any school in Canada and has ties with lots of massive companies such as Google, Meta, and Shopify. Today, we're going to cover everything you need to know, what makes Waterloo different, how to choose the right program, how admissions works, including grades, the AIF and program-specific expectations, and what students should do to stand out in grades 9 and 12. We have Nicola here with us today, who's helped over 1,000 students get into their top universities, including Waterloo and other top universities across North America. So, hi, Nicola.
Hey, great to be back.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you.
Thanks.
And let's dive right into it. So, why Waterloo? What makes it so good? It has all these rankings, this great reputation for employment rates. Why Waterloo?
I think that Waterloo. I mean, typically, I think what Waterloo is known for is just like the industry connections that it has. I think it's known for the co-op placements that it has. Yeah, I think those are the two main reasons. And like we said, like Waterloo really does a great job of the admission process and like finding students that are really decided where they want to go and why they want to be in a specific engineering program. I mean, that's even one of the questions that I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit more. But students are actually asked like, why that specific program? Like, why what kinds of things do they have that or experiences do they have that are related to, say, mechanical engineering versus chemical engineering? And so by them doing that, what it really does is make sure that students that are coming into their programs are like really ready to kind of get down to business. Like they're ready to, this is it. I
Yes.
know this is what I want to do. So they're looking for students that are, you know, have had a fair amount of experience that obviously academically excel. And these students are ready to, commit themselves to a specific type of engineering, and like are really looking forward to, what's going to happen while they're, studying their undergraduate degree, but also, eventually when they finish and become, engineers or whatever program that they're interested. But I know Waterloo is very, very well known for their engineering program.
Yeah, and it really just sounds like a key thing they do well is just ensure that that commitment is there early in the application process and that you can't really make up the commitment. It's something that has to be, they do everything they can to essentially weed out somebody who just maybe wants to get in and isn't sure. Because, and they're very strenuous about that. And, I had some stats here as well that it's the largest co op program with 7,500 employers. There's 25,000 students in the co op every year. And they have a velocity incubator, which essentially launches companies founded by students, and they've launched over 400 companies, and it has all these great programs. And I guess I want to ask you, what's the co-op system like in practice, and how does the Waterloo co-op specifically give students an edge?
Well, I think, first of all, like I mean, obviously, I think Waterloo has really built like a name for themselves. I think that again, like the connections that they do have. But
Mhm.
one thing that Waterloo does is gets their students into co-op early. Some like, even at the end of their first year, basically. So students are really put into that like practical application very, very early on. So you're actually being aligned with companies and professionals in the industry, getting that practical application and that learning very, very early on. So I think that's a big plus. I mean, especially for students that that are obviously very good at academics, but also are really, really good at hands-on learning, right? And so Waterloo, again, like, yeah, they pick students that are going to like represent them. Like they're a school that has built kind of these expectations. People look to them for these very high expectations, right? And so they pick students that really have done a lot of the legwork before coming to their school, and that are really, really secure with, where they want to go,
Yeah.
what they're looking for. So I think, and for students like that, Waterloo is a great place to do your undergraduate degree.
Yeah, and yeah, totally. And they're looking for you to have put in some like a decent portion of the effort in what you want to do in your career before you get there, and that's
Yes,
what makes it so unique.
yes,
At least when we talk about engineering or computer science,
yes,
not speaking for every program, right?
exactly. Yes.
Um, and then I want to now, go into a little bit about the application process. It's we talked a little bit about the co-op program. We'll come
Yep.
back to it maybe later. It's got that astounding 96% placement rate.
Yes.
How does the application process for Waterloo work through OUAC, and what are key deadlines and processes that students should be keeping in mind, or parents, as they apply?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically Waterloo, you apply to OUOC. I, again, typically, when students are applying to Ontario schools, like obviously, um, I wouldn't suggest only applying to Waterloo if engineering is the program of choice. But typically, late October usually would be a good idea. And I would say like Waterloo, they do tend to, like on their AIF, they do tend to sometimes change the prompts from year to year, which is not really a bad
A-
thing. And
And
we
what
can
does the AIF stand for, just so
Sorry,
people know?
AIF, yes. So AIF is the admission information form. And so they're just like basically, it's just basically a form. It kind of takes place of like a personal statement, something like that, that basically shows the school, why you want to be there, basically, and what your passions are. The questions on the AIF typically also ask about, just different things that you might hold personally, like your
Yeah.
critical thinking, your ability to problem solve. So they ask questions, typically four or five uh, questions, maybe six, and those questions are really built on kind of seeing the type of student you are, the extracurricular involvements you've been a part of, and then also just like, yeah, like what sort of like perspectives are you going to actually bring to Waterloo?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the AIF, it changes a little bit every single
it
year.
does. Yeah, yeah.
And how big of an impact does it have on your chances of getting accepted?
I mean, it has a huge impact for sure. Absolutely. I would say again, I always go back to this. Grades are going to absolutely be number one, especially when it comes to a program like any type of engineering. And they're going to be looking at, of course, like again, those core courses, which are your chemistry, your physics, your math, English. Those are going to be very, very important that students do very well. And depending on the type of engineering program that you are, wanting to pursue, grades will be a massive factor. However, AI, because like we talked about this before, because grades are kind of like 90% now or 92%. It's pretty common now. The AIF is what separates students. So it's really that chance for a student to say, I've done this extra work. I am more than ready to come to this school. So it's very important. I would say if I was going to number wise, I'd probably say, your grades are probably 70, 75%. And then your AIF would be 20. And then you've got your interview as well. There's an interview for the engineering programs, which would also be about a 5% as well too.
Yeah, totally. And I think, when it comes to that process,
Mhm.
um, a lot of students don't realize that it's three components, right? They're looking at your grades, they're assessing those, and since there is no standardized exams right now, unless you're in an IB program or an AP program, there's no provincials. So they're actually they're adjusting those grades down
Yes.
for a lot of people
Mhm.
based on how your high school has actually performed historically when students come to their first year in Waterloo. So they're adjusting that down and leveling the playing field. So a 98% from one high school may not be
Yes.
the same as a 95, maybe the same as a 95 in another, right? Or
Yes.
90 even, depending on how students have performed once they've actually got to the first year in Waterloo. They'll bring that down, and that's where that AIF and that video interview really matters. Is like if your school historically has to some extent
Yeah.
inflated grades,
Yes.
then Waterloo's going to realize that, and they're going to reduce your grades down to
Mhm.
match you against the other candidates,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
they're gonna it's going to even it out, and your AIF and your video interview is what's going to matter then. And I think
Yes.
some students sometimes miss that, and we're not saying don't get high grades. Focus on grades, as Nicola said, number one thing for a program like computer science or engineering. But those other things sometimes it can be very close when you're aiming for these super competitive programs.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think Waterloo is actually on that AIF. One of the questions, also, what they will ask you, a student is, have you actually taken, have you taken summer classes or any classes outside of your, your year, like your regular school year? The reason they're asking that is because they really want to see that a student can take, their core courses within a semester, right? And so they don't want to see students basically, taking classes just because, oh, it would be easier if I took it during the summertime. It's a big no no. It's something that I warn students about all the time. If for some reason, you want to take a summer class, that's okay because there is room to write that on your AIF. But typically those classes are because, like, it was not a class maybe offered during the school year, or because you were taking, your math, your science, your English, you didn't have really the space in the classroom to take that extra course, right? So Waterloo really they love to see that you've taken extra. They love that. But they do also want to see that that extra is sort of above and beyond your typical school year. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I didn't know that was actually a question in there. So that's news for me.
It is. It is. Yeah. They actually
Yeah.
asked it. Yeah. They asked, like, what have you, like any, and like, did you repeat any classes? First of all, they want to know that. And then another question is like, why, if you've taken any classes outside, like why was this? And, like I have a lot of students that have taken classes outside. You know, I think it's okay that, say for instance, you took math and maybe the first time around you didn't do a great, like as good as you wanted to. I have said to some students, well, maybe it would be a good idea to repeat that grade 11 math. Like, let's just see, how you do on that. And you can tell, like, you can tell Waterloo, like, I did this and I performed, I got this percentage, during my school year, but I really wanted to make sure before I went into grade 12,
Hmm.
I took this class again and I did do better. I did do better. But that's fine. Or maybe there's a computer science class that you wanted to take but you didn't have room for it in your in your actual 5 classes that you have in a semester. And so you decided, well, I'm going to take that during the summer just because I think this class would be very beneficial
Yeah.
um, to my engineering career. So yeah, so I think students should be very aware of that because
Hmm.
they really, really look into the nitty gritty. Waterloo, like,
Interesting.
yeah, they do.
I get, yeah, and I think that skill of you kind of did it there for the people listening at home, but painting that narrative around your courses, and looks like Waterloo cares about that more than some other schools when it
Yes.
comes to that, at least for their top program. So being able to paint why you've done what you did, and in a positive way as well,
Yes.
while
Yes.
being authentic, it's a skill that a lot of
Yes.
students don't know, or know how to actually do that.
Exactly.
um
Yeah.
and I want to now get into some of the strategies for students that are in grades 9 to 12. So right about now I want to look at the grade 11s first, because they are upcoming. It's a couple months away. If I'm in grade 11, I have a couple months before my application's open. What are my top priorities right now?
Yeah. I think if Waterloo is your school of choice, you're in grade 11. you should be invested in, like, of course, grades. Like, I would say, and then showing like grades, and then also showing Waterloo maybe that you have gotten ahead a little bit, right? Like, so I know we talked about this on another podcast. um Always, like, if you can, get a class, like get your grade 11 classes done, and then take a grade 12 class, and just show them that, what, you are um challenging yourself, you are really invested in, doing, especially those core courses. You're invested in doing as much as possible to prepare you for university. That is key, number one. But Waterloo really cares a lot about, yeah, like that experience building, like, because Waterloo is different from a lot of engineering schools. They actually want you to choose, very much like U of T, they want you to choose your um, specific engineering program. So mechanical versus chemical versus, aeros, like what, whatever kind of engineering you want to study, they want you to choose that. That's a really hard thing to do sometimes, right? And a lot of schools will allow you to go into like a first year engineering without having to pick like a specific program, like engineering program, and they allow you just to kind of take basic engineering that first year. Whereas Waterloo, no, no,
They
no, they,
make you pick.
right? And so they ask you, like, one of the questions is like, tell us why you want to study that specific engineering program. And so you have to be able to talk about, experiences that have led to you choosing that program, not just like engineering. Like, you can talk about that too, but also the more specific that you can get about that program itself, that, specific engineer, the better. And Waterloo will look for that. They will say, okay, well, yeah, I can see that this student has talked to mechanical engineers, or I can see that they've had this, bit of experience here, and they've come to Waterloo and had a campus visit, and, talked to other, mechatronic engineers, right? Like, they love
Yes.
to see that. So I would say, be like if you don't know yet, like if you know engineering and you like building and you love all that stuff, like that's great, but you've got to get more specific than that. So you
Hmm.
have to really start looking at engineer, if you don't know yet, what types of engineers you can be, and then focus on, well, where can I get a little more experience, or what can I do to like research this a little bit more, so that I can explain to Waterloo, yeah, this is where I want to go.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it sounds like focus on the grades. Those really, really, really matter. And
Hmm.
then along with that, get clear on the engineering or computer science or computer engineering program you're looking at, and get clear on which one you want to study and why, because that general stream isn't really an option, or at least not a common one at all at Waterloo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then I think the next thing, of course, like, um, Waterloo also, like, some of the questions that will come up on your AIF are just like, sort of like, questions that will kind of test like your critical thinking and like your problem solving ability, and just like knowing sort of right from wrong, and can you work in a group and collaborate, and those kind. So like having that maturity and having that ability to like use your experiences that you've been a part of, and show them how you have been able to work in a group, and how you have had problems and issues and conflicts that have come up, through high school, through your different activities, and how you've been able to like solve those problems, um, collaboratively, right? So I think, yeah, I think that's the key thing, is just like really being, grades, number one, number two, being really sure of, and being able to write about how sure you are of like the type of engineering you want to go into. And then number three is really showing the maturity and that sense of self, and key perspectives that you have learned through your activities and, throughout high school.
Yeah, and I want to go to activities now. Like, if you're in grade 9 and 10, you want to go to this compelling school like Waterloo in
Mhm.
those competitive programs, pursue that great career. What can students do early to position themselves for success? What are examples of meaningful activities for future computer science or engineering applicants?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, anything STEM related, anything really STEM related, if that's not an opportunity, again, like I remember I had a student that did get into Waterloo and also won the Schulich, did not have really, went to a very small high school. There was really not a lot of opportunity. So he created that, right? And
Hmm.
he started, the whole process of having a STEM, like a STEM club at school. And then, yeah, and it just went on from there. So anything STEM, absolutely. Like if there's a computer science club at school, robotics club for sure, uh, math, doing competitions, science competitions. They love it. Again, they actually ask you, what competitions have you been a part of? And actually, Waterloo being the school that it is, hosts many different math competitions. I mean, students can look those up. They are, they're fantastic. And of course, by doing that, like students always ask me, do you think like if I did it at Waterloo, would it give me? And I would say, of course it will. Of
Yeah, of
course,
course it would.
Waterloo, and putting that on your, of course it will. They actually ask it right on the application. So, and
Yes.
don't focus so much on like the result of like coming in first place. It's like actually doing it, actually putting yourself out there. Um, Taking the challenge, right,
Yeah.
is the biggest part of it. Yeah.
And on the activities, we get this a lot where students seem to care a lot about titles. Now, how much do say titles matter over say the length of initiative and what you were actually doing?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think, like always it does look great. Like if there's like if there's something at school that's missing and you start it and you're the one that initiated it or you become the president of something, sure, I think go for it. Like take it and run with it. However, it's more, I think with Waterloo, it's more about just having those experiences and knowing, how it's going to help you. Like how is it going to actually, get you to the next step, and like the impact that you're making as well as like what you're learning from it, like that is much more important. And of course, yeah, commitment is everything. Like, starting something in grade 12, I've said this many times, it doesn't look great. It just looks kind of like, I better do something. You wake up sort of at the end of your summer and, oh, I better make sure I get in there in September. Doesn't look great. I mean, that stuff should really start very early on. Not grade 9, grade 10, grade 11 is really, we said this, is it's a big year. It's like the year of where, we're kind of taking all the things that we've done and now we're putting it into action. Like I actually, when I work with students and they're preparing their Waterloo AIF, we're not doing that in grade 12. Like we're typically, thinking about what is my personal brand, what is my personal statement, what am I going to tell Waterloo that I'm really great at, and we're solving all those kind of problems in grade 11. So if you're starting that in grade 11, it's really really tough. You're going to be spending the summer before grade 12, because if you're working on that in grade 11, then what do you think you're doing in grade 11 summertime? You're going to be having to think of what am I going to write, because it's difficult in grade 12 to really put 150, you need 150% for these applications. So it's very difficult to do that while you're in grade 12. You've got you've got to keep your grades up. You've got your grad, you've got probably mom and dad like asking you every time, like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? That you've got
Yeah.
going on. And so that's why grade 11 is just like, that's actually the year that everything gets done. And grade 12 is just sort of like seeing it out. It's
Yeah.
just like tying the loose ends up, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So grade 9 and 10, get involved in STEM, get involved in, like, I think Waterloo really does like look at leadership as well, but they want to know sort of the problem solving behind it and like the collaboration and you encouraging leadership. That they love to see that, but they love to see STEM, because if you've done that, then you're able to sort of like say, yes, this is why, again, mechanical engineering or computer science, right? You're able to
Yeah.
give them those um, concrete examples of why you feel you'd be a good fit for that school.
Yeah, and then, I wanna ask you this really quickly, and
Mhm.
then we can go into some of the mistakes and, get to kind of the latter end of this here, is how should younger students think about competitions, math contests, and passion projects? Should they be requirements? Should they be add-ons or learning opportunities? What's your recommendation for that?
I mean, personally, I think they should be requirements, but I do, but it's not always like I mean, obviously, I think in school there's a lot going on in school, and so it is a difficult thing to do, um, because like I schools typically they have requirements for volunteer hours, like they actually have those, like you have to fulfill a certain amount of volunteer hours in order to graduate and get your diploma. Whether you're in Ontario, like and each province has a different set of hours that you have to, but that's different, right? Like that's a lot different. Like just doing those hours is, well, I'm just doing them to fulfill the graduation requirements. A passion project or like creating an initiative, getting that leadership, that's something that's done because you have a passion for that. You see sort of an unmet need, or like a problem or an issue that you can solve, and you are the one that takes initiative. Completely different than just saying, I'm going to volunteer for a couple hours over here at my local, which is still really good, still really good thing. I'm not at all like saying or dissing that at all. I'm really not. It's just not the same thing as like a student taking, making the commitment to like I'm going to be the first one to go and do this, and not only am I going to do this, but I'm going to try to encourage other students to take part and to be leaders as well.
Yeah, and I wanna do a couple examples because people seem to really like when you shared examples of initiatives or even grade averages. Like for students you've worked with that have gotten into Waterloo computer science or Waterloo engineering, what has their profile looked like? The grades, the extracurriculars. Give us some examples. People seem to like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I think people get a little nervous when they hear this, but I think for Waterloo, again, depending on like, there's different tiers of engineering that Waterloo typically goes by. Like, obviously, computer science, mechatronics, those kinds of they're very difficult to get into. And I would say, if you're looking to get into a program like that, you're going to need somewhere in the range of like a 90, probably a 96% and above. Yeah, it's pretty high. And they're going to want to see that, yeah, you have taken extra class, like you've been in a computer science class, you've done things related to your specific program. There are other programs at Waterloo as well, that maybe not quite as high, but I would say typically if you're reaching for a program at an engineering program at Waterloo, like you've got to be in the mid 90s. You've got to be in the 90s. And you have to have something in there that says STEM. Like and probably more than I'd say more than one thing. I would say, maybe a some kind of STEM club at school, maybe a competition as well. And then if you could create some sort of initiative, build a website. If you're in your robotics club, and maybe you are a lead in building some sort of thing in your robotics club, that'd be just a bonus as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, many things that you can do. I think, and I think you want to also sort of think about the story, like where did that sort of like start from again? And
Hmm.
because you didn't just wake up in high school one day and go, oh, I'm gonna, probably be an engineer. I think it sort of stems from things maybe when you're younger and trying to find that, like, I know I've worked with students that, yeah, they just like I had one student that his family owned a farm, and he started to tinker with a lot of the equipment on the farm, and he helped solve problems with different things there, and that just sort of led into that future career of being an engineer, right? So yeah, so I think it's definitely you got to show that you've gotten that experience, and grades, yeah, 95, 94 and above, concrete experience. If you can tell that story again, of being, where it kind of started, whether it was in your family or, a certain maybe you're in grade 8 and you went to a camp and it was all
Yeah.
about science, right? Something like that, I think, is also just a really great story to have, or something to put on your AIF.
Yeah, and actually, I've got some stats here as well because we get asked. We're like, what are
Yes,
the grades you need to get into Waterloo software engineering, Waterloo
yes,
computer science, Waterloo engineering? And here they are. Over 98% of students that were accepted to Waterloo software engineering had an average above 90%, and 86% of those students who got in had grades above 95%
yeah,
for software engineering.
yeah,
For Waterloo computer science, 90% of accepted students had grades above 95%, and 95% of all students that got into that program had grades above 90%. And now engineering, they made this a little bit easier.
yes,
Is that for engineering, 90.5% of students that were accepted into the program had above a 90%, but only 55% of those students, 55% of students that were accepted in total had above a 95%. So it's a little bit easier, which is still uber competitive, still in the 90s for sure. And as we saw for those computer science, computer engineering programs, you can be that student that squeaks in with the
yeah,
lower grades. That does happen, obviously. We're not saying
yeah,
it's impossible,
yeah,
but to give yourself the best shot, those are just the numbers, and that's how competitive the program is. And I think that speaks to what you mentioned earlier, which is they want to take the students they know can handle the rigor when
exactly.
you get to Waterloo, which
Mhm.
because they have those awesome employment rates and these awesome innovative programs, and they're looking for those students. And
Exactly.
I want to now to tie things together. I would love
Mhm.
for you to share what is your, for a student that wants to go to Waterloo, what is your number one piece of advice in one to, two sentences that you'd give them?
I would probably say, try to figure things out as early as possible. Really, it's got to be done. Yeah, like, I mean, I think if you are sure that Waterloo is your top school, um, you need to get figured out, your activities, your grades, like where you are with your grades, and also why you want to go to that particular program by the very early stages of your grade 11.
Yeah, I love that. It's awesome. I think, and if you're in
That's
grade
my
11, it's
advice.
not, you can still catch up. It's just going to be pretty hard. It's going to take some effort and time, and you can still do it. But I
You
think
can.
definitely, I think it's solid advice to say the earlier the better. It just saves you so much stress down the line.
Yeah,
And thanks so much for joining us, Nicola. I know Waterloo is a coveted school, well respected and competitive, and so many students want to know how does this work. And I think you shared a lot about the academic rigor, about what they value, which is that depth and that certainty of what you want to pursue.
yeah,
And I hope it provides some students and parents some insights on navigating the process.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's thanks, Ari. I think it's probably just last thing is one of my favorite actual applications. I really do. I love it. I think it's very to the point, and I find like students that are writing it at first, it's like a little bit, it's a bit hard to navigate. Like it's a little bit like, oh, I don't know what to say here. But I think once students start looking at the questions and really start working hard on that application, they end up really feeling like they actually get a little light bulb comes off and goes. It's kind of like an aha moment where they know, hey, I kind of also, this helped me really understand like why I want to go to this school and like why I want to be an engineer or computer scientist. So yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
totally. Yeah, no, and good questioning, good applications will do that to make you
exactly.
understand that.
Yeah,
So thanks so much for joining us today, Nicola.
no worries. Okay, see you.